Hi, my name is Dan. You've heard of an oil shortage. Since the 1950s, the citizens of the United States were told we are running out of oil. However, why did President Eisenhower want to build an interstate highway system of freeways if we were running out of oil? Clearly, Eisenhower and the major oil companies knew something that we were not being told. Then the Russians found oil thousands of meters below the surface of the earth. How did dead dinosaurs sink to that depth in the earth? How many dead dinosaurs does it take to produce a barrel of oil? What was suppressed in the United States was the Nazi secret of synthetic oil and how that oil is abiotic, not organic in nature. The goal here is to show that hydrocarbon fuels are not scarce. In fact, proven reserves of oil and natural gas worldwide are greater today than ever in human history. Of every continent today, oil and natural gas are being discovered at deep water and deep earth levels. Americans have been indoctrinated by politically correct media to believe we have nearly depleted our continental reserves of oil and natural gas. However, the U.S. is on its way to energy independence. The U.S. could take major strides in the next few years to surpassing Saudi Arabia and Russia as the world's leading oil and natural gas producer. Evidence will prove Nazi scientists understood the fundamental chemical equations that explain how hydrocarbon fuels are produced without the assistance of any dead and decomposing living organism. The point here is that hydrocarbon fuels are renewable fuels naturally produced by the earth on a continuing and abundant basis. After World War II, Nazi records of German scientists were found. Germany spent billions in scientific research on projects that would help Germany to win the war. Records showed how the German scientists unlocked the secrets of how petroleum products are formed. German scientists developed the formulas necessary to produce synthetic oil. The equations are known as the Fischer-Tropsch process. Germany has no petroleum deposits, but it has abundant coal resources, which provided for commercial and home heating needs of industry, the military, and the Navy. However, in the 20th century, fuel requirements began to change. Germany became dependent on gasoline and diesel oil engines for automobiles and then airplanes. German ships converted from coal energy to diesel oil. The solution came in the 1920s. Two German chemists, Franz Fischer, who lived between 1877 and 1947, and Hans Tropsch, who lived between 1889 and 1935, defined methodology for producing synthetic gasoline and diesel fuel from coal. Nazi Germany built 14 synthetic fuel plants, producing 95% of the aviation fuel used by the Luftwaffe. Using the Fischer-Tropsch process, Germany produced 3 million tons of gasoline by hydrogenation of coal. Imperial Japan also constrained by petroleum reserves followed Germany in a synthetic fuel production. In the U.S., the Office of Strategic Services, the predecessor agency to the CIA, secretly brought Nazi scientists to the United States. 7 scientists were expert in chemistry and manufacturing of synthetic fuel. One scientist was Helmut Pilcher, who worked as an assistant to Franz Fischer at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, a pre-war scientific institution. Pilcher did work participating in the manufacturing of synthetic fuels. At the end of the war, Fischer was 70 years old, and Pilcher was the most knowledgeable synthetic fuel scientist in the world, who was still young enough to travel and continue advancing his professional career. Pilcher became a permanent scientific member of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Coal Research. After 1945, he wanted to come to the United States to continue his scientific research and to become a U.S. citizen. Truman wanted him to come to the United States because he wanted a synthetic fuel scientist with Pilcher's credentials. The U.S. gave him, his wife, and 2 daughters permission to enter the country. He joined Hydrocarbon Research Incorporated, where he helped construct a commercial Fischer Trough plant in Brownsville, Texas. In addition, Leonhard Alberts, an expert at operating and managing synthetic fuel plants, along with his family, was given permission from the U.S. government to immigrate to the United States. Pilcher, in later years, said German scientists and engineers interviewed by U.S. intelligence operatives at the end of World War II did not divulge all that they knew. The truth is that up until 1940, German scientists and engineers, with the consent of the Nazi government, had been transferring a considerable amount of accurate Fischer-Tropsch technical information to a consortium of 6 companies that had been members of the old Standard Oil Company. Efforts of the U.S. government to develop synthetic fuel plants were successful. The project never took root in the global economy, where the production of petroleum, that is fossil fuels, was both abundant and commercially profitable. The production of synthetic fuels were interesting to U.S. oil companies and government officials, but it was considered too costly to pursue when oil reserves in the United States were relatively abundant, cheap to deliver, develop, and bring to market. By the 1960s, the U.S. government interest in synthetic fuels was largely academic. The taxpayer funding dried up. As a result, the secret Nazi petroleum secrets languished. Today, Nazi synthetic oil, the synthetic oil secrets remain hidden from the public view because that is exactly the way U.S. oil companies and the U.S. government wants it. The true secret of Nazi synthetic oil had nothing to do with liquefying coal. American scientists saw nothing more in the Fischer-Tropsch process than how to make gasoline and diesel fuel out of coal. What truly the German synthetic oil scientists cracked was the code God built into the heart of chemistry to form hydrocarbons in the first place. Beyond the formulas to make gasoline and diesel fuel out of coal, what the equations of Fischer-Tropsch process postulated was that hydrogen carbons form naturally in the mantle of the earth on an ongoing basis that continues even today. Studied beyond their narrow applications, the Fischer-Tropsch equations reveal the formulas through which compounds, including hydrogen, and compounds, including carbon, in the presence of a catalyst such as iron ore or cobalt, could be made to form various hydrocarbon chains under conditions of extreme heat and pressure. After the war, Russia did not want to be dependent on foreign fossil fuel supplies. Like Germany, they did not have petroleum reserves. Stalin ordered petroscientists to study the Fischer-Tropsch process, anxious to learn what the Germans understood about the origin of oil the U.S. scientists failed to understand. In 1940, Stalin commissioned scientific research examining how fuel is created, why reserves are formed, how oil can best be discovered and extracted. Between 1940 and 1995, Russian scientists published 347 publications on the Fischer-Tropsch process and obtained 170 Fischer-Tropsch patents. In 1951, Professor Nikolai Khodorkovsky articulated what today has become known as the Russian-Ukrainian theory of deep, abiotic petroleum origins. According to Khodorkovsky, oil had nothing to do with living organisms rotting into petroleum. The Soviet theory was that the origin of oil did not come from the once alive biotic material of ancient plants and animals. Instead, the Fischer-Tropsch equations explained the chemical processes by which hydrocarbons were produced as a natural product of the earth itself, manufactured at deep levels where there were no plants or animals. Abundant oil could be found, the Soviet Russians concluded, if only oil wells were drilled deep enough. Today, Russia revealed Saudi Arabia as the world's leading producer of crude oil. The argument here is that oil found near the surface of the earth in sedimentary rock structures was formed at deep earth levels and pooled through cracks in the earth's bedrock, substructure, and more porous sedimentary rock levels where the oil pooled. Synthetic oil is fuel produced from organic material by human action. Hydrocarbon fuels produced naturally by the earth are never fossil fuels produced through biologic materials or organic methodologies. Hydrocarbon fluids produced naturally by the earth are always abiotic in nature. Instead, all nature needs is the action German chemists defined, beginning with Franz Fischer in the 1920s and ending in the Fischer-Tropsch synthetic fuel plants operated by the Nazis during World War II. In the US, the abiotic theory is ridiculed as a conspiracy theory by a scientific community wedded to the concept that oil is produced by organic material. Many geoscientists today do not believe fossil fuel was produced by ancient animals and forests. The vast majority of geoscientists find it impossible to imagine that oil can have anything but a biological origin. How do fossils make fuel? What is the process by which decaying plants and dinosaurs, or plankton and algae, are supposed to decay into fossil fuel? Scientist Richard Heinberg stated that the assertion that all oil is abiotic requires extraordinary support because of the abundant evidence for biological evidence through a well-understood process that have been demonstrated under laboratory conditions. So through this precise laboratory-proven formula under which biological material decays to form hydrocarbon fuel, we can determine if this same process can actually take place within the Earth. In the theory, dead organic material accumulates on the bottom of the oceans, riverbeds, or swamps, mixing with mud and sand. Over time, more sediment piles on top, and the resulting heat and pressure transforms the organic layer into a dark and waxy substance known as kerogen. Left alone, the kerogen molecules eventually crack, breaking into shorter and lighter molecules composed almost solely of carbon and hydrogen atoms. Depending on how liquid or gaseous this mixture is, it will turn into either petroleum or natural gas. The transformation from kerogen to fossil fuels is not an observed process that can be described in a chemical formula such that we can replicate in a laboratory. It is not a rigorous laboratory science identifying how flora and protoplasm turn into hydrocarbons. In 2004, Henry Scott and Dudley Hirschbach, a Harvard University research professor of science and recipient of the 1986 Nobel Prize in Chemistry, wanted to see if they could synthetically produce methane in a laboratory without using organic materials of any kind. They decided to squeeze together iron oxide, calcium carbonate, and water at temperatures as hot as 500 degrees Celsius and under pressures as high as 11 gigapascals. 1 gigapascal is equivalent to the pressure of 10,000 atmospheres. The scientists were testing a fundamental principle of the Fischer-Tropsch equations to see if those materials would produce methane if they were combined under pressures and temperatures comparable to those experienced in the Earth's upper mantle. The idea was to smash the iron oxide, calcite, and water together at the types of temperatures and pressures we would expect to see deep within the Earth and stand back to see what happened. The goal was to prove that a hydrocarbon of the petroleum family could be produced via simple inorganic reactions involving no biological agents whatsoever. Remarkably, the experiment worked. The scientists found they could easily produce methane. Lawrence Freed of Livermore Laboratories Chemistry and Minerals Science Directorate summed up the importance of these findings as follows. Quote, "The results demonstrate that methane readily forms by the reaction of marble with iron-rich minerals and water under conditions typical in Earth's upper mantle. This suggests there may be untapped methane reserves well below Earth's surface. Our calculations show that methane is thermodynamically stable under conditions typical of Earth's mantle, indicating that such reserves could potentially exist for millions of years. Dr. Fried continued, at temperatures above 2200 degrees Fahrenheit, we found that the carbon and calcite formed carbon dioxide rather than methane. This implies that methane in the interior of Earth might exist at depths between 100 and 200 kilometers. This has broad implications for the hydrocarbon reserves of our planet and could indicate that methane is more prevalent in the mantle than previously thought. Due to the vast size of Earth's mantle, hydrocarbon reserves in the mantle could be much larger than reserves currently found in the Earth's crust. Such reserves could exist for millions of years. This laboratory finding encouraged them to contemplate that methane may be a precursor to forming heavier hydrocarbons, possibly even petroleum from abiotic processes in the Earth's mantle. If methane can be created synthetically from inorganic chemicals, biological content is not a necessary requirement to form hydrocarbons. They concluded that the more complex hydrocarbon structures could also be created in an abiotic manner. It is believed if you go deep into the earth, you will find oil everywhere. The reason we find oil in sedimentary rock is not because it is enclosing the rotting biomatter, but because sedimentary rock is porous enough for the oil moving toward the surface of the earth to pool into, or because fissures in the crust of the earth have permitted oil to seep up from the mantle of the earth to pool in sedimentary rock. The presence of macrobiotic and bacterial life observed in petroleum reserves are picked up from the layers of rock through which the oil passed on the way to the Earth's surface. In addition, NASA scientists landed on the giant moon of Saturn called Titan. They found Titan contains abundant methane. Titan's methane is not of biological origin, so it must be replenished by geological processes on Titan. This article is based on notes taken from a book entitled The Deep Hot Biosphere, The Myth of Fossil Fuels, written by Thomas Gold. Thank you for listening. Make a comment or subscribe. I'll be talking about other things as the days go on. Thank you very much.